Okay, so hopefully you read The Cave, you enjoyed it, and here I am. I'm just going to go through little bits of it to try to unpack what's going on. And so, okay, you can already see the back and forth of that Socratic dialogue working and how it's getting the story across. It gets a little tiresome, but it's kind of how he wrote the whole book. Okay, so in the very beginning paragraph, you get a description of the thought experiment that Plato is putting forward. So, human beings living in an underground den which has a mouth open towards the light and reaching all along the den. Here they have been from their childhood and have their legs and necks chained so that they cannot move, can only see before them, being prevented by the chains from even turning their heads. Above and behind them is a fire blazing at a distance, and between the fire and the prisoners there is a raised way, and you will see if you look a low wall built along the way, like the screen in which marionette players have in front of them, over which they show the puppets. I see. And do you see, I said, men passing along the wall carrying all sorts of vessels and statues and figures of animals made of wood and stone and various materials which will appear over the wall? Some of them are talking and others are silent. You have shown me a strange image, and these are strange prisoners. Like ourselves, I replied, and they only see their own shadows or the shadows of one another, which the fire throws in the opposite wall of the cave. True, he said. How could they see anything but the shadows if they were never allowed to move their heads? And of the objects which are being carried in the manner, they would only see the shadows. Yes, he said. And if they were able to converse with one another, would they not suppose that they were naming what was actually before them? Okay, so I'm going to pause there and try to draw out this image. So on the one end of this cave, he calls it an underground den in this version, you have these prisoners. And the prisoners are all chained up in such a way that they can only look in one direction. So again, beautiful art piece. You have these prisoners in the cave. They can only look in one direction. There's kind of a lot of them. They can't even move their heads back and forth. They can only look forward. Above and behind them is a fire blazing at a distance, and between them is a raised way. So there is a fire. That's a great fire. You're going to love it when you see it. And then there is a little raised wall, and then there's people walking, holding things over their heads. So raised above them, there's a big fire back there. That's a fire. Then there's a low wall that blocks the shadows of people. And then above their heads, they hold these figures. So all that the prisoners would be able to see is the shadows of these objects. Actually, I should make this wall a little bit taller so the person can't be seen. And the shadows of themselves. So this kind of is the idea. Okay? It's weird. And that's what Glaucon says, but Plato or Socrates very mysteriously says, like ourselves they are. And then he goes and says, well, wouldn't they believe that that's reality, right? They are seeing on these shadows on the wall, they are seeing the truest form of reality. They're naming those things. And when they hear things talking, wouldn't they assume that they heard it from the passing shadows? Because they don't know that there are people back there, right? They're chained looking only in one direction. And then he starts to talk about, well, what would happen if somebody were freed, right? And what would happen if they got to go up out of the cave and into the light? Well, first, of course, it would be very, very painful, right? The glare of the fire would distress him greatly and would hurt his eyes. He wouldn't be able to even see, right? Just like when we go from a dark room to a light place, we can't see anything and our eyes hurt and we have to wear, sunglasses. We cover our eyes because it hurts. He will be upset if those people tell him what he used to see was an illusion, and now he is getting closer to what is real. So now he is at this stage, right, where he's talking to these people and he's seeing that, these are just images, right? These aren't now, so we're at the shadows. These are just objects that are made to look like something. This is truer than the shadow, right? Because the shadow is another remove. It's only 2D. Now we have this 3D carving or pot or whatever it is. Then, if he is furthermore beyond just those objects, if he is brought into true daylight, wouldn't he freak out, just absolutely. It'll take a while for him to even get accustomed to the real world. He will be dazzled because of the light of the fire, but once he gets out to the sun, holy Lord, it will be insane. Now when he's looking at the world once he's out of the cave, oh my gosh, look at those trees. If any of you have had glasses, perhaps you've had a similar experience. I have terrible vision. And when I first saw a tree, I was like, good God, look at all those leaves. There's so many. It used to just be a blob. Imagine going from only seeing shadows to now you're just seeing representations of things, carvings, whatever. And then you're seeing the actual thing. Holy Lord. Then finally, he will be able to see the sun. First, he can only look at the sun through reflections of the water, but now he can look up actually at the sun itself. And the sun here is kind of a stand-in for truth, right? The form of the good, the goodest. What would happen, he would say. So he sees this truth. Now imagine, Plato asks, he goes back into the cave and he tries to talk to those people. Wouldn't they think that he's terrible and ridiculous, right? He went up and now he's back and he can't even name what the shadows are. He's so bad at their game. And if he continues to try to show them the light, right, that they should ascend into what is real, wouldn't they see him as an insane, ridiculous man and ultimately put him to death? Wouldn't they do that? And Glaucon agrees with him because he's there to agree with him. And then Plato reveals how the whole thing was just an allegory, right? Everything stands for something else. And we start not understanding reality until we get to the final, truest form of reality, which for Plato would be, the true forms, right? That only philosophers have access to. So hopefully you got some of that from the reading. Hopefully you read it too. Don't just depend on me breaking it down. I want you to be able to kind of think about it for yourself. And now I've got some discussion questions. I'm just going to throw all of those into that doc. You don't have to respond to every single one. I just want you to write a response thinking about some of those things. Okay? And then hopefully you will start watching The Truman Show and enjoy it. I'll make these notes. Yeah, we'll be separate, and I'll give you a lot of time to watch The Truman Show so that you don't have to, break it down in just one day. Okay, thanks, guys. See ya.